Cyberpunk Uncensored.
For a couple weeks.
Everything changes.
Everything changes.
How great is it that the audience is here, though?
Yeah.
Caprice has been here every episode.
All right, can you hear me now? Let's
Okay. Fine.
Well, he
So
can
the
hear
audio
me.
is wonky.
All right. Is this a little better? So now you should be able to talk. Let me...
I can talk.
Yes, you can. Let me see.
Are you guys able to hear me at all? Capricious? Furious?
Good. Audio is working-ish. There we go.
Oh.
Hear both. Excellent.
All
Apologies.
right.
Apparently, OBS, which is the program to use for streaming, decided to basically blow up everything in all my original settings. So, my apologies for that, guys.
Every single episode is a learning episode for us.
Jesus, man. I mean, definitely not. We're definitely amateurs. So let me get started and say thanks to Rob from Cyberpunk Uncensored. He was able to send me a new key, which apparently OBS decided to destroy for me. Also, we kind of, just to get you guys up, we just started talking about like a couple things that are happening for us, right? So today I pushed out some code for a new Vendit generator and a Bodega generator for Cyberpunk Red on my site. And if you want to repeat yourself again, Wisdom, on what you have going.
Sure. Well, kids, I've got a couple of campaigns going, and a couple of source books in the works. Future updates for Datafortress2020. Nothing concrete as of yet, but I am typing away. It is working. One of them is the long-awaited Glass Road source book. And then I've got a Nomad, some high espionage stuff coming, and hopefully at some point some updates to the district guide. So,
Yep.
There we go.
Oh, so you're expanding the Night City district guide for 2020?
Yeah, it's that was always the plan, and I put out the combat zone first. And then the plan was always to follow that up with other districts, but then the heart problems and the double bypass and the back problems, and suddenly I couldn't sit in front of a computer for a while.
Well, that's interesting because I'm using some of those districts. In my own campaign.
Anybody who is using those districts, if they've got anything interesting that they want to see, maybe get shared in the final product, I'm more than happy to look at what you got. Send it to me.
Cool.
Datafortress2020. You can find my email address there if you don't want to mess with that. It's just wisdom000@gmail.com.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think this is the first episode. We really don't have a particular topic selected. I think we're going to start working on kind of like scheduling these out a little better for us. Again, complete amateurs. So I think what I wanted to start off with is like what we're going to do is basically give each of you, we each are going to give our top 3 cyberpunk movies that we feel that people definitely should be watching. So I don't know if you want to kick us off, Wisdom.
Well, here's the deal. Are we going to talk just about like live action Western movies, or are we going to talk about anime? Because Jesus Christ, this list is huge. So for now I think I'll just, to start us off with at least, I think I'll leave it to my straight Western live action.
All right. So we're talking about movies. We're going to eliminate TV series. Okay. So it has to be a featured movie. And again, the movie could be an anime. Because one of my top 3 is an anime.
Yeah, I'm going to stick to live action because for me, anime is an entirely different animal. But here we go. Number 1 is, of course, Blade Runner. Seminal, like, it's the movie that started off the whole genre. It's my favorite movie of all time. It's just the perfect representation of the visual for cyberpunk that exists. It's what defined it. The other two movies in my list, I mean, here's the deal. Blade Runner was a huge Hollywood Ridley Scott, Harrison Ford, Rutger Hauer, Daryl Hannah, like Brian James. It was a huge movie with a full budget and all that.
Yep.
My next two choices are both low budget movies that a lot of people haven't seen. The most rewatchable movie in my cyberpunk collection is Nemesis by Albert Pune. It stars Oliver Grunier, again with Brian James and Tim Thomerson. It is more of an action movie, but it is so perfectly representative of Cyberpunk 2020 that it almost hurts. I saw it originally in the early 90s. I was working at a haunted house at the time, and I came home from work. There was a 24-hour grocery store that had a little video section in it, and I rented it from there. And man, I was just utterly blown away with how fantastic Nemesis was. It was the first Western movie to copy the John Woo two-gun style of action. It's been like scenes from it have been copied in countless other movies, where they blow through the walls or where he shoots around himself in the circle and falls through the floor. It all came from that movie, as unrealistic as it might be. At the time, it was just super stylish and badass. And my last choice is a movie that doesn't star anybody's ever heard of. I never see it get added to anybody's lists. But for me, the movie Circuitry Man is just... It is, again, another perfect representation of Cyberpunk 2020. I mean, everybody in the movie has interface plugs. They go from one city, then they stretch across the wasteland to another city. It spends most of its time in the wasteland, I would assume, because of budget issues. But it's a good, solid movie, especially in the cyberpunk vein. Now, these are cheap, low budget franchises, but it's good stuff. They did make a sequel to Circuitry Man, and they made sequels to Nemesis. Best to avoid those at all costs. I would not recommend the sequels to either movie at all. But taken by themselves, they're my favorite cyberpunk movies.
Right. So my top three, and it's pretty much almost on par with yours, except only the last choice. So, I totally agree with Blade Runner, the look and feel, and just the high tech. Really, the grittiness, I think, really brings it home. It definitely looks like a world that's been ravaged by pollution and eco destruction, and just the basically it kind of looks like the downtrodden of humanity. Nemesis,
dystopia.
So Nemesis, definitely liked it. Don't want to give too many spoilers on it, but basically that has, compared to Blade Runner, Nemesis was kind of the super action, right, of cyberpunk, and Blade Runner kind of more geared towards BioWare and biotechnology versus Nemesis, which was kind of the hardware and the chrome, right? And those who haven't seen it, there's characters in there with cyber arms, cyber legs. I'm not going to say that they're full Borgs, but they do run the gamut of androids.
I mean, they kind of are.
Yeah.
Although 96.5% is still human.
Yeah. But you also have androids in that, which is one of those borderlines whether or not it's cyberpunk, right? So like aliens aren't considered cyberpunk.
It's the androids in Nemesis are comparable to the replicants in Blade Runner. I mean, if
true.
It's about the same thing.
And then the third movie that's like my all-time favorite is actually Johnny Mnemonic.
I love that movie.
And to me, it screams like definitely cyberpunk in that where Blade Runner just showed the gritty streets, Nemesis was kind of the action-packed, solo adventure. Johnny Mnemonic was that cross between the corporate world and, the streets, right?
Yeah.
And just some of the characters in it were just, to me, were great. And it kind of almost had almost all the tropes of, except for like, media and Rocker Boy. But it did have a lot of the other tropes in there. Which,
yeah, anytime you can... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Which I kind of like, because then you could actually see, okay, yes, this guy's definitely a netrunner. This is a solo. This is a fixer. This is a corporate, right? And just seeing that played out definitely gives some inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can watch a movie and like be able to like pull it apart and say, well, this is where the inspiration for this came from, or this is a perfect representation of this aspect of whatever. Like we've said many times, this whole channel, this whole podcast is basically comes from the view of two guys who are playing Cyberpunk 2020. So if we talk about a movie, it's how it relates to Cyberpunk 2020, and Johnny Mnemonic, it relates.
Yeah,
it's got it.
So, what three movies do you think, or that you can think of, that aren't necessarily would be classified as cyberpunk, but definitely could be used as like inspiration? And what I mean by that, and I'll give you my three, right?
Go ahead.
So, number one is Warriors, right?
Oh, you stole my idea. That was, yeah.
Because that's not, at the time...
It's not considered cyberpunk, but here's the deal. Right at the start of the movie, they talk about in the near future.
Yes.
Like, it's a science fiction movie.
And to me, I definitely...
There's just a lot of science to it.
Yeah, and you see some of that in the Night City, the Night City guide, right? And that you have...
Yeah.
The main guys, right? Or that main gang is kind of, what is it, the Savage Hearts?
All the gangs that they presented in Cyberpunk, and consequently, when I did the Combat Zone District guide, like all the gangs in my Cyberpunk game, like they're based on movies like The Warriors and The Last Dragon and all these like really stylistic street gangs. I was actually disappointed when I moved to Kansas City because I had thought, like, I lived in like Alaska and like rural areas of Oklahoma and stuff like that, and I had never seen a real street gang, and I moved to Kansas City thinking the gangs are going to be like the Warriors.
Yep.
These colorful, crazy dudes who maybe threw out some kung fu every now and then, and imagine my disappointment when real life street gangs were just some dirty thugs. Yeah. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. Mm-hmm.
Another movie, and I don't think you can really... I'm not sure if it'll be available anywhere. But and again, the problem is not necessarily that it was low budget, but it was actually an HBO movie. It was called Weapons of Mass Distraction. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I
saw that years ago,
yeah.
And oh my God, I had forgotten that existed until you mentioned it just now. Holy crap.
But to me, that was definitely a corporate kind of a corporate campaign, right? So for those who can't see it and will probably never be able to see it, because again, I think it's lost in the annals of time whether HBO releases it again.
I've never seen it on any streaming service. I've never seen it in any video stores. I saw it on HBO decades ago.
So the main premise of the movie is these are two CEOs. Each own like these mega media corporations. So think of like Disney Corp versus, I don't know, whoever their rival is, like Paramount or whatever, right? So these two corp CEOs are looking to basically own a local football game or football team, because that football team is coming up for bid, and both of them want it, and they start using their media corporations to basically destroy, and I mean really destroy each other through, through services or through the news and rumors. And basically it came down to, both of them are like, yeah, you know what? Both of us can really, really fuck each other over, and we will basically destroy each other. So let's call it a truce and basically buy the team jointly. And of course, the other guy was like, yeah, you're right, because I'm about to have a heart attack from the information, you got on me. But it's if you throw in like solo teams and like net running incursions and things like that, you could definitely make a great campaign out of that. And that was always like one of my weapons of mass distraction.
It's interesting because it's like a late 90s movie that, like, reality TV was just starting to get a foothold at the time. I mean, I think back then all we had were Real World and Road Rules on MTV, and that was the end all be all of reality TV. But this movie, like, really dug into that idea, and it was interesting.
Yeah, and my third one, I would say, is Sneakers.
Oh my God, I love Sneakers so much.
So that was with Robert Redford and another all-star
Dan
cast.
Aykroyd.
Yep.
Sidney Poitier.
Phoenix. Was it?
The Phoenix.
River Phoenix. Yep.
A very early appearance from John Malkovich.
Yep. So that movie was basically about kind of an independent investigation team, but they
if you've ever seen I'm sorry, go ahead.
But they kind of did some wet work in a way, not necessarily killed anybody, but they would infiltrate and do things kind of like a cyberpunk team would in the game, right? Yeah,
if you've ever seen the TV show Leverage, where it's a bunch of at the start of the show, it was just a bunch of thieves who hire themselves out to corporations to test their security. That's the basic premise of where Hackers starts. Or Sneakers. I'm sorry, Sneakers.
But yeah, I really love the details in that movie, and that's probably a movie to rewatch to get some gadget ideas.
Oh man, it's one of those quintessential like cyberpunk you must see it, even if it's not near future, even if it's not full of like high tech stuff and flying cars. It is must see. I agree with you 100%. Now I have to think of that's two movies that snaked out from under me. All right, so my three cyberpunk movies. All right. Since I can't use Warriors, number one is Streets of Fire by Robert Hill, starring Michael Pare. Early appearances from Bill Paxton and Willem Dafoe.
Yep.
Yeah. It is I know it's a favorite of Mike Pondsmith's, and it is the absolute archetypical cyberpunk group. You've got your fixer, you've got your solo, you've got your techie, you've got your nomad solo mix. I mean, you've got your, like, this movie is where the prototype for the whole rocker class came from with Ellen Aim. It is almost a paint by numbers representation of what a cyberpunk group can look like. As well as how a cyberpunk game plays out. Like, Ellen Aim gets kidnapped, played by the lovely Diane Lane. I'm probably getting that wrong. That's but anyway, yeah. Streets of Fire, fantastic soundtrack. It's funny, the soundtrack for Streets of Fire, in fact, the whole movie, inspired so many anime series, especially Bubblegum Crisis. Like, the music in Bubblegum Crisis and the music in Streets of Fire are interchangeable. You can play one over the other, and like, nobody will know any difference. The only difference you'll notice is that one of them speaking Japanese and one of them speaking English. Number 2, we took sneakers, man. Casablanca. I mean, it's a classic for a reason. It is the ultimate noir film, which it's Humphrey Bogart at his absolute finest. Lauren Bacall. It oozes style, like it was like, well, yeah, it just oozes style.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen, go ahead.
I've seen it. It's just hard for me. I don't know if it's just age discrimination against older movies like those, to kind of see them as, I mean, granted, they are definitely pieces of art. I'm not going to debate that, but one thing I've always had problems with is a bit of the language they use, which is very 1950s, which oftentimes I have, I think, a hard time getting my head around that.
I love slang, so and slang through the ages. I actually pepper my games and my personal speech with, like, a lot of heavy 70s and 80s slang, just because I think it sounds cool. But yeah, no, I love Casablanca. I love the sound. I love the style. I spent a lot of time growing up on military bases and whatnot. Didn't make a whole lot of new friends very quickly, so it was a lot of watching television during the day in the 70s and 80s. So I got to see a wide variety of stuff. Third cyberpunk movie that's not cyberpunk. I'm going to have to say Reservoir Dogs. Quentin Tarantino's first directed, his directorial debut. He had some movies he'd written come out earlier. Most notably True Romance, which comes in a close second, but for me, Reservoir Dogs is, again, it oozes style, and style is everything. Style over substance, baby.
Yep. Yeah, so I think some people have mentioned Blade Runner 2049 definitely is a great movie. We're not saying that they're not great movies.
Oh, there's a list of runners up going around the block for cyberpunk movies.
I think both of us
length about all of them
have lists on our sites where we kind of mention, various cyberpunk movies to go and watch. Same with Escape from LA and New York. I mean, Escape from New York was definitely a great
Kurt Russell
movie.
is the coolest motherfucker on the planet, and any movie he's in is cooler by definition.
Most definitely. So we're not saying that these aren't valid movies or great movies, but yeah, those movies you definitely want to sit down and take a watch. And again, there's definitely some movies I think that probably haven't stood the test of time. Nemesis is close, but I actually recently watched it and I'm like, yeah, it's definitely has some dated.
It still holds up for me. I mean,
Yeah. The acting
maybe
isn't the best,
I don't
but
know.
to me it was just I think it
Part
was
of the charm for me.
And I think that was like the first movie that really showed cybernetics and having a cybernetic hero, right?
Yeah, I don't necessarily like the way they portrayed the cybernetics for everybody. It was a little too close to Terminator, but it was really cool seeing it on the screen and seeing, that portrayed as a thing. The only other movie that even came close to showing cybernetics at the time was Hardware.
Yep.
And really, that just came down to one dude had a cybernetic arm, and they basically fought a Terminator ripoff.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, Hardware is a fantastically fun movie. It was one of those many that are in the runner-up category.
Yeah, Furious George. Dredd was my fourth.
Yeah,
Cyberpunk
Dredd is came out of nowhere. I don't think anybody was expecting for it to be as good as it was, especially after the Stallone flick, which actually it's not anywhere near as bad as the Stallone flick isn't as bad as people make it out to be. Is it great? No. The idea that Judge Dredd would take off his helmet doesn't work for me in any fashion. Since the character was created in the comic, you've never seen him without his helmet on. But beyond that, it was a pretty good movie. Dredd surpasses it in every way, though.
Yeah, Capricious Nature.
Upgrade was good.
I haven't seen Upgrade yet. I know what it's about, and I've kind of seen little bits and pieces of it, but I've never actually sat down and actually watched it.
It's a good movie. It's a good movie. If you like ultra violence, it will appeal to you. The scene where he makes the dude bite down on the knife, and if you've seen the movie, you know exactly which scene I'm talking about. That alone is worth the price of admission. If you like ultra violence, if you don't, you'll turn your head. But it came out. It's along the lines of Hardcore Henry, where it's cyberpunk, and you can watch it once or twice, and it's a good solid ride. I don't think it's gonna hold up as a classic. I don't know why. That's just the feeling I get from it. Like it doesn't hit me with that same vibe. It's a good movie. I very much enjoyed it. It would not make it to my top 10.
Right. Have you actually taken any of the plots of any of the movies you've watched and actually turned them into games?
Not cyberpunk movies. However, I have taken the plots of movies, of many movies, and just straight stolen them. A lot of Philip Marlowe, a lot noir films especially. The Big Sleep, I turned that into a cyberpunk game. I ran a detective game, which basically every single arc in that game was based on one movie or another. Usually, like just straight up stealing the plots of old noir crime thrillers. One of the first Nomad campaigns I ever ran was pretty heavily. I pretty heavily ripped off Star Wars or the Hidden Fortress. It was actually closer to the Hidden Fortress than Star Wars, but tomato.
Yeah, I've taken bits and pieces of like various scenes from movies, and then put them in my games, but I've never really set out to actually plot out or take a plot of a movie, except, like I said, I've always wanted to do the weapons of mass distraction and just never got around to doing it, right? Like that would be like WNS versus DMS or Network 54.
If you want a good cyberpunk corporate reference, there was a series that was called, I think it was just called Corporation. It didn't start. Yeah, it was straight cyberpunk, but from the viewpoint of corporates, and it was produced by Matt Damon. Like he wasn't in it at all; he just produced it. But it was.
Yeah, I think the
Sci-Fi
TV
Channel?
series was Incorporated.
Incorporated, that's the name of it. It was fan bloody tastic.
Yeah.
And it only got one season.
Yeah. So if you want to talk about TV series, yes, Incorporated was definitely one of my top 3 when it comes to TV series.
Oh no, I call it first. You gotta come with your own.
I gotta come up with my own. All right, so fine. Max Headroom would be my next number one, as it were. And with Max Headroom, you can actually see that influence in Cyberpunk 2077. When you have the news report in the beginning and you see somebody out in the junkyard with a TV, or even going around the city seeing everybody just glued to televisions out in the open.
In my humble opinion, it is the second best representation of a cyberpunk media there ever was. I love Max Headroom.
So what's your next TV cyberpunk series?
There was a Total Recall television series.
Showtime, I think it was.
Yeah, it ran on Showtime very briefly, early 2000s. It was a blink and you miss it series, but man, it was cool. To me, it was better than the movie. It was before the Colin Farrell movie by like a decade, but it was better than the original movie, just style alone. The Schwarzenegger film is fun, but it was kind of goofy. And while the TV show didn't have the budget of all that, it was still really cool.
Okay. My next one is actually going a little ways back, and it was more of a mini-series than actually a full TV series, and that was Tech Wars.
The William Shatner property.
Yes.
That's
it was definitely a bit campy, but the one thing I liked about it was they actually showed poser gangs.
I've got a love-hate relationship with that show.
So that was mine, and to me, it just definitely has. It could have gotten a little grittier, I think, but I found it a good especially a good early representation of cyberpunk in TV.
Yeah. All right, I'm not going to go with the obvious choice of like Altered Carbon. because, like I said, that's a little too obvious. It's
I would have to
a
argue
beautiful,
that
beautiful series.
it is a beautiful series, but is Alter Carbon technically cyberpunk, or is it sci-fi? Because it does have aliens
out there. Yeah, it's got it faster than light travel and instantaneous like mind transference across the galaxy. It's a little bit far future for a typical cyberpunk. So what I'm going to say is, and it wasn't really my number 2, it wasn't really a cyberpunk series. It just had cyberpunk elements to it, and it was called Highwayman. And basically, it's more of a post-apocalypse thing, and it's like about these dudes who drive around in these really futuristic trucks. And the trucks are what stick in my mind, because one of the trucks, it turns into a helicopter. I really fucking enjoyed it as a 12-year-old. I haven't seen it since, but man, it stuck with me. I don't know where you could possibly find it. I don't know, maybe on YouTube somewhere. I haven't tried to find it personally, because I think if I do, like those rose-tinted glasses are going to get ripped off, and I'll see it for how awful it actually was. But in my mind, it was a badass show.
All right, my third and last one, and it's not because I adore the actress, but Dark Angel with Jessica Alba.
That's so good. She was so attractive.
Just to see, a semi-corporate, semi-high government strike team, that person going rogue and having, being augmented, and then the whole environment of what became of like Seattle after an EMP, right? And just seeing that society is trying to build up, even though there's that high tech, there's still that really low life environment in the whole thing. And it also is great inspiration for like coming up with cyberpunk scenarios.
For me, my number 3 is another James Cameron-based property. This Sarah Connor, Terminator: The Sarah Connor Chronicles. Man, was it good. And it was better than any of the movies that came out after 2. And it was a direct sequel to 2.
Right.
Unfortunately, it died a very premature death.
Yeah.
It had a superb cast, including Summer Glau as a female like Terminator, and she's just this tiny thing, but she pulled it off.
Yeah, I was able to catch a couple episodes of it.
It really should have gone a lot further than it did. It got canceled because they released that god-awful Christian Bale Terminator movie. Oh, man. Yeah. I was not a fan.
Right. So, I think we also mentioned some things like anime. You want to give your top 3 anime?
Oh. All right. This is... Again, I've got a list of anime that goes around the block. But the number 1 is the Bubblegum Crisis franchise, including AD Police Files and Parasite Dolls, Bubblegum Crash, even the remake, the second TV series, Bubblegum Crisis 2040, and then the AD Police that came with that. But Bubblegum Crisis is as good as it gets. My number 2 is Appleseed. Appleseed is what got me into manga and anime as a whole. It is my favorite manga of all time. They made several films based on Appleseed Only one of them, an OBA in the 80s, was like hand-drawn animation. Everything else has been CGI, but it's been top quality CGI every time. And then my last would be Cyber City ODO.
Dun dun dun! Wow, I'm surprised you didn't snab Ghost in the Shell and all its properties.
You know, like I said, list goes around the block, but I prefer Appleseed to Ghost in the Shell.
I don't know, man. Them fighting words for me.
Yeah, I mean it's. I loved the Ghost in the Shell manga, and when the original movie came out, I was a big fan of it. But honestly, this is going to get me in a lot of trouble with people. But I think Mamoru Oshii and most of his movies are pretty damn boring. I don't think he knows how to pace a movie. He's got one of the finest animation studios on the planet working for him. And when there is movement, when there is action in one of his movies, it's beautiful. It is a thing to behold and worship. Unfortunately, most of his movies, he's got his characters just standing around. And especially in Ghost in the Shell, they're just standing there almost perfectly still, talking monotonously. And it is hard for me to care.
Yeah, my wife doesn't care for Ghost in the Shell because of how long or how quiet and how much dialogue is done. Because
now, go ahead.
She's a bit of a writer, so she's of that philosophy of show, don't tell. Whereas Ghost in the Shell was more about telling than showing. Oh yeah, don't even give me the Scarlett Johansson crap. Don't even talk about that furry history. Yeah. That was an abomination.
Standalone Complex, the series for Ghost in the Shell, the original Standalone Complex and Second Gig.
Yep.
That's about the perfect representation on screen of what Ghost in the Shell is. It really bugs me when people talk about the original Ghost in the Shell and then start referring to the movie. The original Ghost in the Shell is a manga by Masamune Shirow, and it bugs me when people give Oshii the credit for it. As for the live action movie, it wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen.
True.
I mean, whoever designed the sets was a genius.
Yep.
Like
visually, it was awesome.
That movie, yeah, visually it's amazing. There's a lot of controversy about Scarlett Johansson playing the role of Major Kusanagi. I don't care about that, honestly. Major Kusanagi is a cyborg body. In the manga, she definitely was not Japanese, or at least her body wasn't. Well, probably one or two of them were, but she had like 12 of them.
Yep.
So I don't care that she wasn't played by a Japanese actress. That doesn't bother me in the slightest. There should have been more Asians in the movie, seeing as it took place in Tokyo. But overall, I mean, I knew what they were trying to do with the movie, and I thought the representations were pretty good. So yeah, it's not the greatest thing. It's not the worst thing, right. But visually, it's gorgeous.
So my second choice of an anime would be Akira.
Yeah.
Granted, it definitely borders the line of supernatural. Just because, a body can't triple its size with no matter to consume and create it.
The whole sonic aspect. Yeah.
It definitely borders the line of cyberpunk, and yes, I will say that it might not be truly considered cyberpunk. But another one, and I think, and again, this is another borderline between cyberpunk and mecha, right? It would be Pat Labor. in those anime.
That's my favorite Oshi property is Hot Labor. Hot Labor. It was a really good franchise.
Yeah, and I don't consider it mecha. I know there was mecha in it, but often the mecha plays more of a central role when it comes to mecha movies, you know, versus what those were was kind of a side.
Yeah, they
thing,
treated
you know?
they treated their mecha, they treated their labors like just like vehicles, like they would get in. It wasn't the focus of the show.
And that's why I think it was more cyberpunk than mecha, in my opinion.
Yeah, it made it a lot more palatable.
So
those are good, solid choices.
yeah, I try my best.
I saw Akira in the theater, and I loved it so much that I convinced my art class to go on a field trip, an after-school field trip with me to go see it.
Really?
Yeah, including the teacher. We actually, art club was an interesting year for me. Not only did we go see Akira, we saw Allegro Non Troppo and an animation festival that was the first time. Like this animation festival that toured the country was the first time that Ren and Stimpy appeared.
Really?
And that was its big claim to fame. Yeah, but Akira. Yeah, it's good stuff. It's just I would have personally preferred Akira if they just stuck to the biker gangs in the future city and had it just be about that instead of bringing in the psionic stuff. But that's me. Yeah.
And again, you know, some of the stuff we've suggested throughout the show, you definitely want to see. Make your own opinions, and you definitely can disagree with any of our options. But all of those are definitely have some grain of goodness that you can leverage into your own cyberpunk games.
Yeah, even some of the worst cyberpunk movies out there. Furious George in the comments mentioned the Super Mario Brothers movie. There's stuff. It is a cyberpunk movie. You're right, and there's stuff in there that you can crib for your game. The feel of the streets in that movie was pretty solid. It was a good, solid representation of a dystopic future. The movie is garbage. It is such hot garbage that I can't really recommend anyone wasting their life watching it. But another video game movie from the 90s was Double Dragon, and it was pretty cyberpunk. It's not a good movie. What movies would I suggest that feature nomads capricious? Well, I mean, other than the Mad Max series, you've got Wheels of Fire. That's a favorite. You've got Battle Truck. You've got
Damnation Alley. Would you consider that?
Damnation. The Glass Road campaign that I ran, that I'm basing the source book off of, was heavily influenced by Damnation Alley. In fact, I use that as a selling point for my players. Like, if you've seen Damnation Alley, it's going to be kind of like that. There's a movie called Neon City. It's another low budget Mad Max ripoff, but that's kind of what my current campaign is based off of, which it basically just follows this bus that takes people back and forth from major metropolises across the wasteland, and that's what my current Nomad campaign that I'm running is based off of, kind of. That and an episode of, oh shit, what's the name of the show? Defiance. Yeah, there's a lot of good Nomad stuff. I mean, Book of Eli, that was pretty good stuff.
Tank Girl.
Tank Girl is always. I love Lori Petty so much. Oh my god. even the more like deeply disturbing movies like The Road, it's good inspiration for a Nomad game. The Motorcycle Diaries, that was a good one. Yeah, Turbo Kid's fantastic. Like for a movie that came out of nowhere. Yeah.
Yeah, Elysium is definitely a cyberpunk movie. I don't know if I would consider it a Nomad movie.
Yeah, Elysium's good. It's I wouldn't consider it a Nomad movie per se. I would consider it a Combat Zone movie. Yeah, there's a huge list of Mad Max ripoff movies that I deeply love. Some of them I can't actually like recommend people to watch. Like I'm not going to tell anybody to watch, Bronx Warriors or anything like that, or Prototype X-29. Like, good God, these movies are horrible. But there's stuff you can grab from them. Like, give anything a chance, really. Yeah. What do you got?
For Nomad, I think I said Tank Girl was definitely one.
Oh, yeah.
Damnation Alley. What other Nomads were there? I mean, like, Cyborg kind of was, right? That was the Rucker
it definitely was. That was Albert Pune introducing the world to Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yep.
Actually, Cyborg 2 is one of the better cyberpunk movies out there, which introduced the world to a very young Angelina Jolie.
Yeah, so there was Cyborg, and I always get them confused. So there's Cyborg, and there was Omega Doom.
Omega Doom, Rutger Hauer.
Those were the two I always get confused with. But both of them kind of are like, out in the wastelands type of movies.
Cherry 2000.
Oh my God, yeah.
That's both Cyberpunk and Mad Max at the same time. Plus a good look at both solos, nomads, and corporates. And it's one of the many movies on my list that feature Tim Thomerson.
Yep. So, speaking of Elysium, right? So, to me, Elysium, you definitely could make a cyberpunk red, right? So it's a collapse of the world. Now, granted, you might have to change some of the canon, but
yeah,
turning space into the Eden, right, is definitely a great way of doing it, because that's how, like, Hardwire, right?
Yeah,
is based off of, and there's a bunch of various novels where space is the place to go. And speaking of space, if you want to see a good kind of cyberpunkish, kind of one of those borderlines, is Outland with Sean Connery.
Yeah, that's
him playing a cop.
It's the best outer space cyberpunk thing there was up until Expanse.
Yeah, again, Expanse is one of those. I'm one of the guys who.
You're right. It goes too far.
Aliens is just that line, and yeah, psionics is kind of this weird gray area as well when you're debating what is a cyberpunk versus what is sci-fi or supernatural. There are cyberpunk elements, but it's hard.
Yeah, it's like
first
aliens.
season.
I mean,
yes,
it's cyberpunk elements, but it's not actually a cyberpunk movie.
Yeah, first season of The Expanse definitely was. But yeah, the other ones I'm not when they got into future ones where that started becoming more alien. That's kind of where it was like, I don't know.
Yeah. Season 4 just did not do it for me. Season 5 kind of got back on track. Actually, season 4 or season 5 really got back on track for him, but season 4 was a slog to get through. Neuromancer, I mean, space was a part of it. I wouldn't say it was a big part of it. It was mostly just like a background in the setting. They didn't really focus on the space aspect.
Well, at the
of
end,
Neuromancer.
when Chase was infiltrating the station, right, and getting to the AI.
Sure, but again, like it wasn't. I don't know. It's been a while since I read Neuromancer, but I don't remember, other than it just happening to take place in space, space being really all that much of a focus for it. But it's been a while. It's been a while since I read Neuromancer. I know that's blasphemy, but well.
It is what it is.
Yeah, Bellflower. I have not heard of that. You've intrigued me. I'll have to check that out. Furious. There's a movie called Avalon. Not the Mamoru Oshii Asian film. There's a Western movie called Avalon, which is ridiculously cyberpunk. It deserves a mention because nobody's ever heard of it. I don't know why I brought that up. Yeah, I could literally, I could keep going all day about cyberpunk and post-apocalypse and
what other things to watch.
Yeah, movies based on that nature. I will say what we haven't covered so far is comic books, and I'm only bringing it up because so far Cyberpunk 2077 has had several comic book series either come out or be on the verge of coming out. The original, like the first one was Trauma Team, which was a mini series, and then they followed that up with a comic book called Where's Johnny. There was, if you bought the Rockstar energy drinks, there were some comics you could get off of that. There was a...
They also have a comic that you got with a download of Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah. There was Big City Dreams. There's now You Have My Word. Only one issue of that's been put out so far that I know of. They may be up to issue 2. I don't know. I'm sadly out of touch. But in addition to that, there are just a ton of cyberpunk comics, including the greatest of all time, Transmetropolitan, which is the #1 representation of a cyberpunk media that there could possibly exist. It's basically cyberpunk Hunter S. Thompson. If that doesn't sell it for you, we have no starting point for conversation.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into too many comics when it came to cyberpunk. I know Hard Boiled is
Frank Miller and Jeff Darrow.
That I think I've only read, but I'll definitely check out the Transmetropolitan.
Yeah, Transmetropolitan, the Appleseed manga.
Well,
trying to keep
manga,
it
yeah.
3.
Like manga, I got the most of Shiro's manga.
Yeah.
Also, like, and I know it's now a series, Psychopaths.
Yeah, that's pretty good stuff.
And
for me, manga, there was late 80s manga called Xenon Heavy Metal Warrior. That and Appleseed are probably the two biggest manga. Like, this is why I like cyberpunk reasons out there. Influences. That's the word I was looking for in my idiotic brain. And there's also an American artist named Adam Warren who put out several different Dirty Pair series. I still classify them as manga because really he's the only Western artist out there that truly gets what manga is. He hasn't put out a Dirty Pair series since the early 2000s. He does his own series called Empowered now, which is, he's got a bondage fetish, but yeah, his Dirty Pair was phenomenal. A lot of people are going to disagree with me on that. I don't care. There was also a mini series based on the Steve Jackson property, Car Wars, which was called Car Warriors. Big stretch there. That was put out by Epic Comics in the 90s, the early 90s. That if you can find it, it's pure win. It's only 4 issues long, but it's good stuff.
Yeah, I actually got into Car Wars when it first came out in those little box sets.
Yeah.
And
Those box sets were cool.
And just unfolding the map and trying to like lay it flat so you could have the cardboards on it was it was always a pain in the ass. But I also got, what was it? Car Wars. Yeah, I was big into that back in the 80s. Didn't have too many players to play with.
On the Nomad aspect, there was a series by Tim Truman called Scout and Scout War Shaman. That is just, it's amazing. You need to check it out. It's late 80s. It is your Mad Max post-apocalypse vibe. It's got some cyberpunk stuff in there too. Like, I would recommend it highly.
What was that again?
Scout and Scout War Shaman by Timothy Truman. They were put out by Eclipse Books. I guess I think they fell afterwards under the Dark Horse imprint when Dark Horse swallowed up Eclipse, but I don't recall ever seeing Dark Horse do anything with the property. Now Tim Truman is supposedly, he's going to put out like a follow-up to it. I don't know if they ever got published or anything like that. I've never seen them in any of the stores, but I would highly recommend that.
Yeah, there was another kind of graphic novel that Frank Miller did, which was called Ronin.
That's good stuff.
Which was
if you like Samurai Jack, like Samurai Jack basically ripped off Ronin 100%, like that. It was before Frank Miller lost his mind too.
I think Frank Miller never had a mind.
He started out brilliant, but he sometime in the late 90s, early 2000s, he just, like, whatever grasp of reality he had, I don't know, 911 fucked up Frank Miller. That's what I'll say. From what I understand, he has like started to swing back towards normalcy now, finally. I'm not really sure. I still love Sin City, but the dude's definitely got problems with women, and he should probably see some professional help about that. Brilliant writer, problems with women.
Yeah.
I did not mean to step on your toes with that.
No worries. Love the art, not the artist, right?
Yeah, sometimes. There was in the early 2000s, or there was a Image put out these 2 series where they tried to, like, the art was horrible, but the coloring was fantastic. The coloring, they were called the series were called Dark Minds, and then there was a follow-up called Neon City. And Neon City was basically like the Akira motorcycle gangs. It was just a comic about them, and that's all it was about. And the art, I like the dude who was doing it. His name was something Lee, and he wasn't related to Jim Lee. It was just common last name. Pat Lee. Pat Lee was his name, and he had like his whole family and his whole, like, this whole group of friends who worked under him as part of the Image imprint. But Dark Minds and Neon City were ridiculously cyberpunk, and the coloring process they used looked like anime, literally looked like animation cells. It was gorgeous to look at, even though the anatomy that these guys had poor grasp of anatomy, and they'd kind of pepper everything. But their backgrounds, their technical stuff, that was all fine. That was all beautiful. So I would recommend taking a look at those. Vertigo Comics put out a series called 2020 Visions, which is it's a 12-issue miniseries broken up into 3-issue arcs, 4 3-issue arcs. It is not an action comic book at all. It is very much a thinking man's version of cyberpunk. I mean, the first 3-issue arc had art by Frank Quietly, and it basically follows this old dude who's a porn collector in a time where there's this plague going on. I recommend it. Go read it.
All right.
I'm starting to go off on in my head. I'm going off on these long rants, and I'm trying to stop myself from doing that here.
Well,
Fell was great. Fell was fantastic. Anything Warren Ellis is going to be fantastic. I don't care about the controversy. As a writer, the dude is my favorite of all time. Video games? Sure, I'll do video games. My number one pick for cyberpunk video games, besides Cyberpunk 2077, is a Sega CD game called Snatcher. It was Blade Runner, the video game, before there was a Blade Runner, the video game. Like, the gameplay wasn't the greatest, but the story was epic. And it's really early Hideo help me out here. What's the guy's name who did Metal Gear Solid? Kojima?
I don't know the authors.
It's really early Hideo Kojima, after the original Metal Gear, but I think before any of the sequels, or at least before Metal Gear Solid came out. And Snatcher itself had a sequel called Police Knots, which actually gets mentioned and talked about in Metal Gear Solid. But yeah, it is good stuff. And yeah, Furious Beneath the Steel Sky was pretty good.
The only cyberpunk games besides Cyberpunk 2077 for me were Deus Ex and the old Shadowrun game.
I very much enjoy the Deus Ex series. I'm not a big fan of. It had the same problem Cyberpunk did, in that it locks you to first person. Not a fan of that. But they're gorgeous games. I never got to play the Shadowrun games. I didn't. I don't know why. It just never. I never got the opportunity.
I know there's a new generation of the Shadowrun games that I've yet to play, which I think is in third person. Who is it? Hairbrain Screams, I think.
Yeah,
produced them.
They're not on PlayStation, so I'm afraid I don't get to experience. Yeah. Let's see. I mean, I consider I've spoken about it many times, but for me, Grand Theft Auto is a cyberpunk game. Or at least it gives me the same feeling I get when I'm playing Cyberpunk. The open world, the vehicles, it's not Cyberpunk, but it's as close as I could get for years. There really aren't that many great Cyberpunk video games. It's a real missed opportunity in my eyes. That there aren't more. There are games that have cyberpunk elements to them, but there is a serious lack of actual cyberpunk video games out there.
Well, I think the genre really hasn't gone completely mainstream. I know the Matrix kind of pushed it a little, but I don't think it's still, even to this day, is really fully mainstream. Because I think there's a lot of starts and stops with the genre.
Yeah.
Like Matrix, awesome. Tried to put out a video game, not so awesome.
I love the video games. I didn't get to play Matrix Online, but the console game that they pushed out, I enjoyed it. It followed the movies a little too close, but for me, the problem is I don't really consider the Matrix to be all that cyberpunk in the first place.
I
just don't.
So Furious George, I have not played System Shock. I've seen it.
No, I haven't either.
I'm interested in it. I just never got around to playing it. Just one of those things. Like my problem was 2003. I became a WoW head, and when it came to computer games, so that kind of like derailed any of my computer game intake, as my wife was already kind of annoyed with what I was already spending so much time on that game with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely have missed quite a lot of the video game scene. I mean, back in the 90s, it was one of those things where I needed the best, always updating my systems to get the latest graphics so I could play, the latest gen games. So, yeah, kind of got derailed after that.
There were
hard resets.
I've not even heard of that one. I need to look for that. There are a lot of like independent cyberpunk games coming out with like weird, kind of weird premises. Like I don't remember the name of it, but there's a bartending game that's cyberpunk that's out there. There's another one where you drive a taxi, like basically an Aerodyne taxi. You're flying around in a car picking people up. I mean, they're interesting. They're definitely independent games with like really low budgets. A lot of them, there's a lot of side scroller or isometric games that are out there that are getting put out that are cyberpunk games. I can't bring myself to play a side scroller or an isometric game, no matter how much I may want to. I grew up on that stuff, and as soon as 3D graphics became available, that's what I like. I can't. It's like going into a retro arcade. It's fun for me for about 20 minutes to go back and play those old games, but my home system is so much better, and the games that are out now are better. I can't bring myself to play a side scroller. I just can't. It hurts me.
Yeah, I can't remember last time I played a side scroller was probably on my Atari 5600. If that's dating myself.
That's dating yourself pretty hard.
Yeah.
It hasn't been that long for me. I want to say the last time I even watched someone play a side scroller is my brother played Castlevania Symphony of Night, and I liked watching him play that. I even at that point though, even the early days of PlayStation, I couldn't bring myself to play any side scrollers any longer, but I could watch them still. Yeah, nowadays I can't do it. There's a couple that I've got, and yeah, I've got Observer. It's interesting. It's very slow. I picked that up just because of the Rutger Hauer influence.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more we can be rambling. Yeah.
I can keep rambling about this stuff forever, but it's going to stop being interesting pretty quick.
Yeah.
That's the rub.
It is. Yeah, so again, I loving all this suggestions of these games. I'm writing most of them down. I'm going to check some of them out. But yeah, when you're working with cyberpunk and coming up with your ideas and your adventure, or even your characters, there is a well of stuff that you can pull.
Oh yeah.
And when you're playing the game, do not feel ashamed that you're completely ripping off something.
There is inspiration everywhere.
Yeah.
Steal liberally.
And my suggestion is, if you are going to steal something for your players, so if you're a referee, make sure that it's kind of obscure, that your group probably has never heard of the stuff you're about to rip off. So that way it's kind of a surprise for them. And believe it or not, they will think you are a mad genius with ideas. Because I had a GM once that ran us through this great campaign, and I was like, man, your imagination is amazing. How do you come up with all this stuff? And at the end of the campaign, he's like, yeah, I totally ripped it off of this movie and this series and these books. And I'm like, I've never read or heard of those things. He's like, yeah,
I know.
That's why you guys enjoyed it so much. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, find something that you dig, find a premise, find a scene, find even a moment. It just, like, a moment can inspire. And make it your own. Like, that's what every artist, every writer in history has done, is they get inspired by something and make it their own. And it's no different when we're running games. I steal plot points liberally from everywhere I look. And then I make them my own. Yeah. I take these pieces from this puzzle over here, take these pieces from this puzzle over here, and I make my own puzzle with it. And hopefully it's something the players enjoy. Hopefully it's something that if I put it up on the website that people can use.
Yeah, and you actually converted some of the anime and manga stuff for like Appleseed and Ghost in the Shell on your site.
I did Appleseed and just general Shiro stuff, like tech stuff. And I did like I converted all the vehicles from an obscure anime called Cyber Formula, which is just race cars. The race car article was actually the very first thing, one of the very first things I ever did. Appleseed was number one, and then Race Cars 2020, where I just like stat out the vehicles in cyberpunk terms for Cyber Formula, which don't actually resemble anything from the show. I just like the way the vehicles look. Yeah. The guy I took over the site from, the original owner of Datafortress2020, Paul Miner, did the Ghost in the Shell, the actual Ghost in the Shell source book. I just did the tech for it, the guns and whatnot. And then somebody else, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I could probably look. Did a Dominion source book for the site.
Yeah, I keep on forgetting, like, back in the day when sites were getting created, it was kind of like an article that people would actually reach out to the webmaster and contribute to a site. I think with my site, it never really got anyone to contribute. So it was kind of like my own foray into coming up with things.
With Data Fortress, when Paul Miner was running it, when I first got into it, I just hit him up out of nowhere and was all like, "Look, I like your site. Can you use this stuff?" And he agreed to it. And, I just kept I kept puking shit at him. I think when I puked up Autumn Blade, that was the last straw for him. He's like, "Look, you can just take the site, take it off my hands." Paul Miner was a good guy. I hope he's doing well. I haven't talked to him in a couple of decades now. I know real life got the best of him early on. I think originally Data Fortress was just like a college experiment for him. But yeah, thank you, Paul. I owe you Data Fortress 2020. So just throwing that out there on a public acknowledgement.
So, what novels do you consider cyberpunk? And I think Furious George is asking, outside of Neuromancer and Do Androids Dream. So I can give you a couple of ones that I've read. A lot of Bruce Sterling stuff. Isles in the Net, Artificial Kid. Those are two books that I really liked from Bruce. There's also Walter John Williams, right? He did Hardwired, which was a supplement to Cyberpunk 2013, and B, he actually play-tested Cyberpunk back in the day. Another one was a book called Market Forces, and I don't remember the author. Let me do a quick... But basically that book was kind of more of a corporate environment in which how you got ahead was by killing your boss. Which was a pretty good novel that I've uncovered. Let's see. Richard Morgan, Futures for Sale. Science fiction novel. Yeah. Set in 2049.
I like Effinger. When Gravity Fails, again, it got turned into a source book by Effinger. since I started, like when I first started running Cyberpunk, like an early background music choice was the Dune soundtrack. So when I discovered Effinger, it really kind of meshed with that. Like I had already had an interest in the Middle East, and the two of those things together just really appealed to me. There was also another popular album choice was the Peter Gabriel's Passion, the soundtrack for The Last Temptation of Christ. Hello?
Hey, I'm here.
Okay. Sorry, everything got real quiet. I thought I'd been disconnected. I got worried.
Just letting you talk, man.
Let's see. Pat Cadigan's Sinners. That's a good one. I liked that one. Snow Crash. It's hard to go wrong with Snow Crash.
There was another novel, and I had to look it up, by this guy, William C. Dietz, or Dietz, Dietz, called Bodyguard. It's kind of sci-fi-ish, but it was kind of cyberpunkish. The one thing I liked about the main character was, so he had neural implants that kind of were bad neural implants. So every once in a while he would like glitch and start spouting out nonsense, which I always loved as a concept for a character.
That sounds pretty good. I like the idea.
Yeah, I read it long ago. I don't think it was like a big seller, but and it's not called The Bodyguard, it's just called Bodyguard.
May have to check that out. Stephen Barnes put out a series of books about a character named Aubrey Knight. I think the first one was called Gorgon Child. I forget what the follow-ups were, but I enjoyed those books. They were pretty fun. Actually, no. The first book was called Street Lethal. The second one was called Gorgon Child. I forget what the third one was. I don't know that I ever. Yeah. And of course, pretty much my actual favorite cyberpunk book, I think, is A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick.
Yeah. A lot of what Philip K. Dick did was cyberpunk. Because you had the Minority Report that came out of that, Paycheck.
Recall. Paycheck. Of course, Blade Runner. I mean, everybody points to Gibson, but for me, for my money, if you want the real godfather of cyberpunk, it's Philip K. Dick.
Yeah.
He just wrote all his stuff before Bethke coined the term.
And if we're talking about novels, R. Talsorian actually published 2 cyberpunk official.
Well, we
Cyberpunk
don't talk
2020.
about those. No, don't do that. Oh,
I never read Hollow Man. I did read Ravengers, and the first time I read it, I stopped after 4 or 5 chapters.
They're so bad. I got so excited when I came across them in the bookstore, and oh man.
Yeah.
Like there's nobody on the planet that loves Cyberpunk 2020 more than I do. So when I tell you that under no circumstances should you read these novels, please listen to me. They are they are painfully bad. Like, you will hurt yourself reading them. Your brain, your eye will start twitching. Your like synapses will like start shutting down.
Yeah.
Oh.
And it's not that they're bad because they're not representing the game world.
No, they're just bad.
They kind of aren't, in a way. Or at least if that's the game world, it's not the game world. The majority of cyberpunk people I've played with see it as. I never read Hollow Man, so I don't know anything about it. I think it's about a netrunner, but Ravengers is about a gutter punk solo that basically gets a big job, kinda, to do some work, which really is him going across the country from Night City. And honestly, I could never get to the end of the book.
No, there's the Ravengers is about two netrunners named Bite Boy and Bite Girl.
Oh, Hollow Man, you mean? Ravengers?
Yeah, one of the other. Jesus Christ, dude! Don't make me relive these memories. Just remember how god awful they were, and I wanted to love them so bad. I honestly, I think how bad these novels were is why nobody else ever got to write any novels for Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Because there were people, there had to have been people just lining up around the block to try and submit stuff to them. Because this was the 90s. Like,
yep.
Shadowrun had just tons of books. Warhammer, tons of books.
D&D, tons of books.
D&D, Jesus fucking Christ.
All the games had, and that was kind of like how a big moneymaker. Yeah, it was a big moneymaker.
Every game out there. Hell, Vampire the Masquerade novels, like all the games that had reached any level of success had their own novels. And then there come these two books by a guy named Stephen Belias, who, as far as I know, never wrote anything else. Yeah, just avoid him at all costs. Stephen, if you're out there listening, I apologize. I'm sure you put a lot of heart and soul into these books, but yeah, no, I did not enjoy them at all.
Or at least we hope you improved your skills as a writer.
I mean, just ouch. And I realize, on the novel front, that's where it goes. There have been some short story compilations that I really dug, whose names escape me because I buy those things like popcorn, or at least I did, when money was not so much of an issue for me.
Yowzers. So I just went to Goodread to look at the Ravengers. 3 out of 5 star. Well, 3.04 stars out of 5, with 23 ratings.
I think all 23 of those have got to be from Stephen Belias.
Seth Skarskowski actually did one. As a huge fan of Cyberpunk 2020 game universe, I enjoyed this book mostly because I was already familiar with the world. As a standalone book, without having read many game supplements and playing games in the universe, it was okay.
The next time we talk to Seth, we're bringing that up.
He wrote this back in 2014. Wow.
Yeah. Well, maybe Seth saw something in him I didn't see. I just
or I saw.
Seth's a good guy. Yeah.
I did not.
But I can't in any consciousness recommend these books for any reason, unless you're just a completist who has to own everything Cyberpunk 2020. Then by all means, add them to your collection. They are not hard to. They are not expensive to get a hold of.
Hollow Man has a higher rating of 3.19 from Goodreads.
Holy shit! Amazon has 4.5 stars. Of course, it's only got 8 ratings. Damn.
Maybe we're wrong. I
Crazy.
don't know.
I mean, damn it! I don't want to read these books again. I'm gonna have to try it. Yeah, no, I don't get it. Anyway, that's a weird tangent. For the sake of my own sanity, we're gonna switch subjects here. I have to. I
Okay.
can't talk about these books any longer.
So what's the new subject?
I don't know. We talked movies, we talked books, we talked comics, we talked anime, we talked video games. What's left?
Other role-playing games?
Sure. Top 3 non-Cyberpunk 2020 Cyberpunk role-playing games. My number
Non-cyberpunk.
one is
What's
non-Cyberpunk 2020.
Okay. Yep.
My number one is a weird one. It's a French role-playing game called Cops. And I love it just for the art. I've got PDFs of the books. Apparently in Europe, like role-playing games have a very limited run, I guess. I don't know. Like they put out a bunch of supplements and then disappear. I don't know the whole story behind it, so I'm just going with the art that I love. And it's some of the most cyberpunk badass art I've ever seen. Like, very consistent, full color artwork. I recommend it on that basis alone.
Okay. So for me, the closest other game that I felt really tied into cyberpunk, and kind of it was an alternative history, which cyberpunk currently is, was Twilight 2000.
I love Twilight 2000 supplements.
Yeah, being a you know, the world's basically falling apart and you're just either trying to make it home or trying to eke out survival. And it was just as lethal as Cyberpunk 2020, which again I kind of like those systems for whatever reason.
My number 2, I love Twilight 2000, by the way. I bought all the, it was weird because the gaming store I went to, I was able to get pretty much all the supplemental material for it for dirt cheap, like used copies of it. Like we're talking like 50 cents a book. I don't know why they were selling so cheap because I thought they were brilliant. Heck, the gun books and the vehicle books alone just provided hours of stimulation and inspiration. Like I'm a big.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I buy any kind of splat book of like gear and guns that I can find. I think my number 2 game though for non-Cyberpunk 2020 Cyberpunk games was Paranoia.
Love
You
that
go
game.
into that. You go into that game with a sense of humor, and it is always going to treat you well. Even, just remember the computer loves you.
Yes. And don't fuck with the computer.
Don't fuck with the computer. Do not commit treason. Sedition is frowned upon. Take another pill.
God, I love playing that game. It is just so absurd.
In fact, there was a Cyberpunk 2020 Paranoia, like dual, like crossover source book called Alice Through the Mirror Shades, which, yeah, it's worth a look. I'm telling you.
Yeah, so, I mean, I hate to say it, but Shadowrun. Now, granted, I don't like my elves in my cyberpunk, but I kind of had to kind of play it with some of the guys I was playing with, because there was one guy who was he was not into close to reality games, I guess. He wanted some type of fantasy element in the games he played. So that's kind of why, that's kind of why we had to, that was the only way I was going to be able to play any type of like cyberpunk game at the time. So yeah, Shadowrun, even though to me I feel it ripped off Cyberpunk 2020, and just bashed D&D.
I own a lot of Shadowrun books specifically so I could use them for Cyberpunk 2020. Beyond just the Rigger Black book and what was the other one? The Street Samurai catalog.
Yep.
But I mean, some of the modules, adventures, campaigns, whatever. Some of those are really good. Mercurial is top-notch stuff.
Yeah.
My number 3 is a toss-up. Cyberspace from ICE was fantastic. Their supplements, like the Death Valley Free Prison, the cyber papacy, whatever they call it. It was like their supplements were top notch. I didn't care for the system very much, but I liberally stole stuff from it for my cyberpunk game. And cyberspace ties with a really obscure 90s game called Underground, which it was a horrible system, but the idea was novel. It was like superheroes in a cyberpunk world with art by Jeff Darrow, who did Hard-boiled. Sorry, I just had a brain fart that was physically painful. Who did Hard-boiled with Frank Miller, one of the greatest cyberpunk comics there ever was. But Underground had this amazing art, and it was really big for like a year, and then nobody's ever heard of it since.
Yeah, there was a lot of games back in the 90s that kind of were rocketed off and then just fell apart. That was Mayfair Games for Underground.
Yes, it was.
Are they still in business?
I don't think so. I haven't seen anything come out of Mayfair since the 90s.
Mayfair Games was an American publisher. They are the English language publisher rights to Settlers of Catan, so yeah, they're probably still in business.
Good for them. Yeah, no, that definitely would have made them some money. That is a popular game.
Yeah, so my third game would have been Car Wars with GURPS.
Good choice.
Because GURPS also brought in, and they had, I don't know if they had a strict cyberpunk supplement. I know they had Cthulhu Punk that I played.
Oh, it was definitely a GURPS cyberpunk. I mean, it got raided by the FBI and everything.
Yeah, but actually, yeah, that's right. You're right. I did.
Yeah, like GURPS cyberpunk was a big deal. Like it was really.
I don't think I played it or ran it, but I do have the book for it. But I did play, Car Wars with GURPS.
Yeah. So. I don't like the GURPS system. As fiddly as I am with Interlock Unlimited, GURPS takes the rule-heavy aspect a little too far. I don't know. In the first place, they break down their rounds to 1 second apiece, and that just hurts my brain thinking about.
There was definitely a lot of crunch with GURPS. Not as bad as the Ice games, Iron Crown games.
No.
Vampire Bites Carbon 2192. That was a game that just came out, I think. I think I played that. So my current group that I'm running for, prior to me taking over and running Cyberpunk 2020, we had another GM who started off running Cyberpunk 2020, and then the pandemic hit, and then we kind of went online and we tried, I think, Carbon 2192. We tried it. It was an alright system. The one thing I think I remember about that game was the economy was really crazy. Like a phone would cost 5,000 credits or whatever you want, and guns were completely outrageous, expensive, and your starting off cash was like maybe a couple hundred like credits, but everything cost like multiple thousands of credits to buy, which didn't make sense. You could rent a gun, which was an interesting concept. But I think that was the game. I know there was two kind of similar games that just got published, trying to ride that wave of Altered Carbon.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of cyberpunk role-playing games out there. Some are going to be better than others.
I actually purchased this thing called, I think it's over on my shelf right now, Cybernet, OGL Cybernet, which was basically a D20. Back in the beginning,
I really
D20.
liked the source book for that. I didn't care for the rules, but I liked the book.
The book it's definitely laid out nice, and it has great graphics, and some of the stuff in it is good. Other than being D20 for Cyberpunk.
Yeah, they put out an official like Cybernet soundtrack that was pretty good. I forget who the artist was who put it out, but the music was good. It is good background music for your cyberpunk games.
From Mongoose. You can actually still get it on Drive-Through RPG.
Yeah, a guy named Stratos put it out.
Yeah, again, I was looking at it because, trying to get other players into Cyberpunk is always a challenge.
Yeah.
I think back in the day it was a little easier because there was a lot more people wanting to learn different systems, and every system that was kind of published was not the same, right? Because it was very territorial. But when the D20 went with the open license, that kind of opened the door to basically clone that system into every type of genre.
Yeah, between D20 OGL and Savage Worlds, there were just a glut of source books of every genre suddenly coming out from every fly-by-night publisher there was, and some of them were good, some of them were not. But because they all use a unified rule system, they all got a little bit more of a boost than they would have otherwise, and that's not a bad thing. I like variety. Granted, I'm only ever going to play Cyberpunk 2020. And I will liberally, as I've said many times throughout this episode, I will liberally take from other games.
Yeah, and that was
even
the strategy for me in buying that was trying to, everyone was into D&D 3rd edition and that whole boom where, all all these other gamers were picking up different sources, you know, that was kind of the avenue of way players wanted. They wanted just the same system, whatever genre they did, and that's why I picked it up. But again, after reading it with the levels, I'm like, that's not Cyberpunk. I can't do this. So I actually never ran it.
Yeah. Like I said, some like the various degrees of quality. And some of them, like the quality was in the art, some of it was in the writing. But there's something there. Yeah, even in the worst stuff, you can find something you can use. If you look carefully enough.
Yeah. So we're about at the 2-hour mark. I don't know if you want to call it a show.
I
don't know how much.
Well, I said I could go on talking about this stuff forever.
Right.
At some point, it just turns into us rambling about nothing. Yeah, no, it's as good a place as any to call it, I guess.
All right.
I have very much enjoyed doing this episode.
Yeah, and I appreciate everybody who was on chat. Definitely
thank you
love the feedback.
Yeah, thank you everybody for being patient with us at the start. It's every episode is a learning experience for us, and I don't do any of the work. Like all the good stuff that comes out of this is from Will. He's the one who sets up the recording. I just sit here and talk like an idiot. So, Will, you are the man. Just to throw out there that you get your props.
I try. All right, man. We also like to thank Cyberpunk Uncensored. Rob, thank you for resending the Steam key so I could actually, or Stream key, so I could actually get this going for tonight. So definitely check his stuff out on Discord and his site. And again,
as always, Rob, thanks for hosting us on Cyberpunk Uncensored.
Yeah.
We very much appreciate that.
And check out my site at cybersmily.net. Again, I published 2 little new apps to go check out.
Check out my site at Datafortress2020.com. I'm Wisdom. And I hope you guys have a great night. Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, guys. Bye.